Hi everyone, welcome to the Wheel of Mind, the Wheel of Time point of view reread podcast. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 9, where we've been reading Nynaeve Almira's points of view. I'm your co-host, Lajara Dane of the White Aja.
Hi, and I'm Giskel Semaras, a scholar from Ilion. I want to remind any new listeners to this series that The Wheel of Mind is an in-depth character reread podcast, and we will throw spoiler warnings out there at any time. This is your only spoiler warning. Also, I want to take a minute and thank all of our loyal listeners. There are so many of you out there. The group has really been growing, and that means you've been inviting friends, and we've been adding new listeners, and we really appreciate that. This is a fun project, and we're glad you're part of it. Now, today we are going to be examining The Fires of Heaven, chapters 16 and 17.
And I'll get us started with my summary of Chapter 16, An Unexpected Offer, which begins where we find Nynaeve awakening from the night's dream walking and some good old-fashioned nightmares to boot, following our previous episode. She had told Elaine what she had learned from Egwene and her tower trip, and she still had scratches from Egwene's punishments, but she kept that part back from Elaine. They started getting ready for the day together and arguing about their plans. Nynaeve wanted to go to Tyr on a coach, whereas Elaine wanted to take a ship. The matter didn't seem settled yet, but Elaine moved on to asking whether Nynaeve remembered the name of the town where the Blue Aja were gathering. She didn't, but she would keep trying. Elaine also questioned the wisdom of sending Birgitta to watch Mogideon. Nynaeve replied that it would be better than waiting for the spider to find them first, but she still didn't know what they would do when they found her. All of these issues unresolved, they went down for breakfast. The common room of their inn was full of white cloaks, but that didn't bother Nynaeve, as the men seemed very intent on their food. And now the reader is reminded that Nynaeve is playing maid to Elaine's character, Lady Morellin. They had a long breakfast until Elaine suddenly dropped her knife, looking like she had seen a ghost. It was Galad, who recognized Elaine despite her dyed hair. Nynaeve was so enamored with his beauty that at first she did not even notice his white cloak uniform until Elaine mentioned it. He was happy to see that they had gotten away from the tower, but was sad Egwene wasn't with them. He and Gawain both really cared for her, but Gawain wasn't here anyway. He had remained in Tarvalon. Surely not supporting Elida, though. But according to Galad, they were finally freed of Siwan's plot, as the woman had been deposed, stilled, and executed. Galad was speaking discreetly this whole time, and offered to escort them safely to Camelin. Elaine gave a cagey response. After another white cloak came over, Galad equivocated to conceal their identities, and left them alone. Elaine rushed them up to the room, summoning Tom and Julin, explaining all to Nynaeve and Tom. Galad, who was not her brother, by the way, would always do the right thing, but he might see both carting her off to Camelin or turning them into the White Cloaks as the right thing, so it was hard to tell what he would do. But either way, it wasn't going to be good. Nynaeve didn't get what the big deal was. He was family, and he couldn't be that bad, right? He could even be helpful. Tom agreed with Elaine, though. After some discussion, they decided they had to abandon the coach and would join the circus as patrons, heading to Gildon instead of straight to Tyr, as Nynaeve had thought. As they packed what few things they would be able to carry, abandoning a great many more, Nynaeve had the story from Elaine about how she knew Tom before and how she felt about him. She concluded that Tom seemed fatherly toward her, but that Elaine foolishly did not look at him the same way. She then asked Elaine one more time whether Galad was really capable of snitching on them. Elaine insisted that he was. So Nynaeve sighed as she packed. Men, put here just to vex women, she sometimes thought, and thus ended Chapter 16, An Unexpected Offer.
This is one of those chapters that lends so much realism and credulity to the entire story because you never just face one problem in life. There's always a whole pack of them that attack you all at once. So trouble definitely roams in packs. So here they're thinking about all the things they already have to deal with, all the problems they're facing. Walk down to breakfast and face to face with Galad, who is now a white cloak, and they didn't know that until this point in the story. So yeah, this is the way life goes. Everything bad hits you when you're already dealing with other problems. Never at the right time when you've got it all together. Now, I like how it opens up with Nynaeve being, I guess, somewhat surprised that the question of how they were traveling was still unsettled, because she reflects back on the discussion they had had off page before, that, you know, she was not going by ship. She had no
Mm-hmm.
desire to be outside the sight of land at any time. Now, she didn't even really like traveling by boat downriver, but she could accede to that. But then when it comes to getting out on the sea, no way, not happening. She had made that clear. But Elaine had different ideas, and you see that Nynaeve is not really used to dealing with people who can be as stubborn as she is.
Yeah.
At least from my perspective, it just seemed to surprise her. She had said what she felt, and she thought that was the end of the discussion. Um, so, you know, when people have differences of opinion, there are some very healthy ways to go about resolving that, and then there are some unhealthy ways. And one of the unhealthy ways that I've seen before with Nynaeve, but this one really pointed it out to me, is once she says what she thinks on the subject, that's pretty much the end of it in her mind. She thought the discussion was over. She,
Yeah.
she thought there was no more to say, and there was more to say. People can have other opinions, and sometimes very valid opinions.
Yeah, I think something else realistic about this situation is just how it seems like Nynaeve isn't going to be happy with anybody else's ideas. It's got to be hers. Um, because she's pretty firm about not wanting to travel by ship here, but, and we know how seasick she gets, and that's not very surprising. But just in our previous episode, she was complaining so much about the coach and how she wished they had chosen to travel by ship instead. The opening
That's
of the first chapter
yeah.
we discussed last time when they're um, in that coach here on their way to Amador. So it seems like it's only a suitable option if it was her idea first. And then no
Right.
matter which one they pick, she's going to blame it on somebody else and think that they should have done the other one.
And granted, we've pointed out in many of our episodes here, she has some very good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Even back in Falma, when they were looking to rescue Egwene, it was pretty much all her plan at that point, and they pulled it off wonderfully.
Yeah.
And all throughout, as we see different things they get into, she is a good leader. She's a natural leader, and she's normally able to take her ideas and other people's ideas and incorporate them together, as long as they're sort of headed toward the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
But when those ideas diverge completely, she's very stubborn about that. She's not good at dealing with opposing ideas to hers.
Mm.
Complementary ideas, she will work that in. Yeah, she's great. She will. We're on the same team. Diverging ideas, no way, not having it. And I'm surprised it didn't break down into a fight, or not a fight, but an
Yeah.
argument again right there at this point. She let it go. But even that, she has this sense of superiority. Like, well, I'm going to let it go for the time being until we, get her to my point of view later, more
Yeah.
or less. I'm reading between the lines.
Like a
That's not a
parent
direct quote.
saying, "We'll see," something like
Yes.
that.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And she does view a lot of the people she's around as if she's the only adult in the room.
Yeah,
That was
she
a
super
great way of
does.
putting it. Thank you.
And in some
And
ways,
then,
she
go
is
ahead.
good at planning things, some things behind the scenes by herself. Like, she's really frugal. She's really practical in terms of making sure what supplies they need.
Yes.
She's been
Yes.
pretty good at planning for life on the road, even though she hadn't done that before. I guess it was her experience from like tracking, and I guess her dad probably took her camping and stuff like that, in addition to all the kind of, woodsman type skills he imparted to her. And she's really good at like trying to anticipate the things that other people wouldn't think of. She's very much the um I'm not sure what to call this, but she's like the manager at a business that like orders all the supplies and like does it enough ahead of time to make sure nothing's going to run out. Like, I'm thinking it like a
Right.
restaurant or something. Um and so
Very
she's thinking now they would
practical.
never think about the sewing kit, because I mean Elaine is so used to, she's got servants who have all the supplies that they would need. Like, Elaine doesn't have the experience to plan these types of things, and the
Right.
men might. She's probably not giving them enough credit, especially Tom. But they might also have different standards of how they want to, in what types of comfort they want to travel, that
Yeah.
might not be up to Nynaeve's standards. So I just thought it was another example of how like practical and frugal she is, and how what a good planner she is sometimes. Again, like if there's not conflict about it, like you said.
And she has a lot of common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just to stop and look at a a situation objectively and gauge what they might need. And I like that about her. Again, she's a very good person. She's not a bad character in any way, but she is very short sighted in some things. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
things like this, practical things, even things dealing with relationships. We'll get into that a little more in the next chapter. But she has a good head on her shoulders about seeing what's going on there and how to deal with problems, and whether it's, as you said, a problem with supplies or a problem in the group. But then again, sometimes she, as I think Egwene said, when she gets that muley look, she's not going to change her mind. You stop trying at that point, because every now and then she digs in her heels, and it seems like it's over the small things.
Yeah,
But
it
I would
is.
have to say those. I think that reveals a lot about who Nynaeve is, because you do tend to be more compliant with things that are not as important to you, and you tend
Yeah.
to be more rigid in things that are very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And with Nynaeve, there's a proper way of doing things. There is, again, just the practical, down to earth, everyday situations that she is good with those. She knows how to handle those. As you said, she seems to be good at knowing what to take on an extended trip like this. But then again, they've gotten a lot of experience with that over the last several months, because they've been doing a lot of traveling. And she does have those skill sets and she uses them. Um, but then again, when she doesn't get her way, you see she she starts a lot of passive aggressive behavior. Now, here there's a quote I'm going to pull from their breakfast. The breakfast was good. It was nice. Here is a quote about strawberries they had for breakfast that I think really encapsulates how she acts in this passive aggressive manner. Quote, though they looked like no berry that Nynaeve had ever seen, they certainly did not taste anything like straw. End quote. Well, of course not. But she can't just stop and savor the moment and see, do I like this? Do I not like this? She's having to be critical of even the name of the strawberry, even though she seemed to like them with cream on them. That was, it
Mm-hmm.
tasted good, but she was not going to give it a chance. She had to be critical of it, critical of the name, since she couldn't really be critical of the flavor, critical of
Yeah.
the way it looked. It didn't look like any kind of berry she had ever seen. So that she's just in that kind of mood right now. I'm really surprised she didn't stamp her feet and get completely out of character, rather than continuing to act like the lady's maid that she's pretending to be right now.
Yeah.
Because sometimes she can do that when she's sulking. She can stay in character until she just reaches this point where, okay, it's over with. I'm blowing cover and I'm taking everybody down with me. And she's not quite there, but you can see her building toward that. All right.
As far as her kind of, I guess, like pettiness, the stuff she kind of holds out on, um, she still is sort of like willfully, ignorantly misinterpreting the way Melaine talked to her. Um, and she's still salty about the way both Melaine and Egwene treated her when it comes to just trying to warn her about Teleron Riad. She thinks it's unfair. And she uses that word almost like the way a little kid does. Anything that thwarts their desires, anything they don't like, is unfair. It's not unfair because
Yeah.
there's nobody else who's not being told the same stuff. I mean, Egwene was too. She's just also circumventing those same recommendations, um, and she's taking this frustration out on Elaine, and she thinks about how Elaine needs to be taken down a peg. But then she's kind of wavering about it. She can't really make up her mind because she thinks, well, I'm being too hard on her. I need to make it up on her later. Yet she's not, or I need to make it up to her later. Yet she's not using that guilt to treat Elaine any better, which she really needs to be doing right now. But I think we pointed out in our last episode that these two have got to be really sick of each other. Anybody would, in a much shorter road trip, probably have some similar tension. And these two have had a really long road trip from the perspective of probably us and most of our listeners. We're not used to that type of extended travel with somebody.
a few hours in a vehicle, and we all get stir crazy. So
Yeah.
I really cannot imagine. Uh, even, oh my goodness, my grandmother traveled across part of the Midwest in a covered wagon. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
several weeks journey. I
Mm.
cannot really imagine that, and trying to put myself, mentally, and then with a group of friends that none of whom I'm related to, traveling across a country I've never seen before, like they're doing here in in Amadisia. It's crazy. I cannot imagine the kinds of frustrations you would have with some of these people. But let's say that Nynaeve, though she can handle a lot of hardships, does not handle frustrations nearly so well.
Yeah.
Um, Again, that's another parallel with Matt Cawthon.
Mm-hmm.
She will handle the be fighting with one of the Forsaken. She will handle the fear of Black Aja sisters, that rather than knowing you're going to run across one, she's actively hunting them down. But so the big things like that, she never mentions it. She just goes right along with it. But the little things like Elaine not listening to her about taking a ship, and you know all of these small things, it just builds up into this frustration that she wants to explode. And you're right, we catch more of this in her thoughts than we do her words. Now sometimes she bursts out with words and actions again that everyone looks at her like, who is this crazy woman? But we see it building and building and building until suddenly she just explodes. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it's actually healthy, but there are a lot of these things that we see in her thoughts that she wants to pretend is not there. So she tries to put on a good face up to a point. Uh, so yeah, everyone around her, I don't think, becomes as aware of just how these frustrations are building with her until she does, you know, do something crazy, and she does some crazy things. Again, I
Yeah.
like our girl Nynaeve, but she does some crazy things.
She does for sure. Can you imagine how just flabbergasted Tom and Elaine and everybody else were when Nynaeve reached up and grabbed Tom's mustache to get his attention?
Exactly, exactly. She had seen, Elaine do this so many times, and it's cute, and it's, Elaine is reliving these memories of her infancy. But what did Tom say? He turns around and sputters, you don't have to pull a man's face off or something. I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but
Hmm.
he was upset. It was not a gentle tug
No,
the
she
way
was
she meant.
totally missing the context of why Elaine was doing that, and just didn't read the room.
Right, right. Oh, yeah, that was funny to me. And at first I missed it. I was thinking Elaine did it. I'm like, why
Yeah.
did he act this way this time? And then you go back and look at it. And like, oh, no, no, no. I missed that. Nynaeve did that. And Nynaeve was, she thought of it as a way to get his attention, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good way to get his attention. He may stroke his mustaches a lot. And, and Egg, I started to say Egwene, Elaine may pull on him a little bit like a child,
Yeah.
but yeah, you don't just grab and turn his head around with a handlebar mustache.
No.
That's not a good thing to do. Um, but again, that is just like Nynaeve to do something like that. Um, Again, I was a little taken aback by how she found herself acting around Galad.
Yeah.
When he sat down at the table, she's thinking, no man should be that good looking. And then she stops and mentally, kind of takes a self awareness check and wipes the smile off of her face. So she caught herself grinning at him. Just as she had, I think it came about right after she thought about how silly all these women were, that all the even Aes Sedai, just following them around, giggling and acting like girls, and then she realizes, oh, I've got a smile on my face. Let me get rid of that. Um, and let's face it, Nynaeve can be very nice and friendly when
Hmm.
she wants to be, but it's always on her terms. She
Yeah.
wants to face the world on her terms, not anyone else's. And when she wants to be nice and friendly and you're behaving, then yes, she can be nice and friendly. If she's having a bad day or you're not doing what she wants you to do, she has a subtle way of letting you know that, and it's not generally with smiles. it could be with a stick. That has been known to happen. Oh, but yeah, that's our girl Nynaeve. I do enjoy going through her character arc here.
Yeah, and those were pretty much my notes on this chapter. Did you have anything else?
No, that's all I've got on that one. So, yeah, with no further ado, I'll take us into chapter 17 entitled Heading West. So, Nynaeve earned a sore finger trying to sew at a seam on Elaine's dress, while Elaine wins an Oscar for her portrayal of a spoiled noblewoman. This was all an act to fool the serving girls at the inn, of course, and as soon as they had left the room, Elaine jumped up. She and Nynaeve changed clothes and finished packing the last few things that they would need for their sudden trip. After sneaking out the back way, they met Tom and Julian about 5 miles outside of town. The men had procured an old enclosed wagon, which would not only complete their disguise, but would give them a place to sleep at nights. That might come in handy if you just happen to meet up with a traveling circus. Anyway, Nynaeve was glad that Elaine had finally stopped simpering over Tom, and she studied the old man's weathered face for a moment. Quote, "There's no accounting for some women's taste." End quote. I guess a weathered face and white mustaches could never compete with Plain's angles and a harsh blue-eyed stare. So they discussed what little gossip they had picked up in town as they traveled on the road, and how this would affect Rand and the prophecies. It seemed that the White Cloaks were trying to unite countries against this new false dragon that was out there. Before long, they got to Valen Lucas' traveling show, which was still encamped beside the road, though he did not look so happy to see them this time as he had before. He assumed that either Elaine, known as the Lady Morellin, had either lost her fortune or had been a complete fraud to begin with. Elaine instead offered him a story about running away from a terrible arranged marriage that her brother had, and Luca didn't seem to be buying it. Still, he would agree to the 100 golden crowns in addition to Elaine paying for their operating expenses after she made the offer. But he would only do it so long as they would work for the show. No one rides for free. Lucas suggested that they could even clean cages, for example. Tom stepped up, did some dazzling juggling, which Luca liked but seemed largely unimpressed. Luca then suggested that Elaine could pay her way posing as his lover, but she demanded to know about the high wire setup that was still there in the camp. Now, it seemed that their hapless tightrope walker had died the day before when practicing, so Elaine promptly climbed up the ladder and easily walked across the rope, even doing 2 cartwheels along the way. Nynaeve knew that Elaine was using the power to walk along a plank of air, but it still looked very impressive. Elaine even suggested that Julian could do this as well. Sorry. Elaine even suggested that Julian could do this as well, quickly leaving Nynaeve out of it at a glare. And Julian, unwilling, walked across the rope. Luca even loved the way that Julian acted terrified when he went across. When asked about Nynaeve's talents, she gave him a smile that seemed to. I'm sorry, I cannot read today. When asked about Nynaeve's talents, she gave him a smile that looked more like a threat, and he backed up and decided to leave her alone. The other performers came out at all the commotion, and introductions were offered all around. The boar horse trainer, Sarandon, was quiet, but she did catch their attention with her soft, slurring accent, which identified her quickly as a Sionchan, not the Sharan that Luca had claimed. Elaine and Nynaeve got a chance to pull her aside and speak privately a little later, Elaine assuring the woman that they would keep her secret and protect her in exchange for information. Upon realizing that Elaine truly was of noble birth, the woman fell face down and swore fealty to her. The chapter ends with this quote: Nynaeve sighed heavily. They were going to have a fine time traveling to Gildan.
Well, I found another place that Nynaeve was pretty clever. So, in the previous chapter, she's pretty practical and smart, common sense about planning their supplies, like I noted. And in our previous episode, she was actually really sharp to catch on to what all the different clues in the White Tower meant when they were in Tel Riyadh investigating. And
Yeah.
here she makes some pretty good leaps again, where she deduces, once she learns a little bit about Tom's history, she deduces that he must have been, witness to or even involved in some court intrigue,
Mm.
which I thought was really smart of her because Elaine has totally missed that. Elaine is politically astute. She does tend to be quick to pick up on political stuff because she's been trained in that, but she totally missed that, and Nynaeve noticed it. And I think it might have to do with Elaine being a little younger, also, being having this strange relationship with Tom right now that's having her seeing him in a different light, maybe, whereas Nynaeve is an outsider to that, is able to put together a couple things a little bit better. But I just thought that was really smart of her that a lot of other people haven't jumped to. I think the only other person who would have realized how much more there is to Tom based on what little he says probably would have been Moiraine.
Oh, yes. Moiraine definitely knew a lot of the things are going on in his
Yeah,
background.
well, we know that for sure, but I just mean like,
Right.
uh, you know,
With so
she
few clues.
exactly, yeah, she hadn't had it all spelled out for her, but she figured it out, I think.
And she came to this conclusion while she's looking at him and studying his features, his face. And she thinks about that old weathered face and the shaggy eyebrows and the long mustaches. And she's looking at all that somewhat critically. And of course, this is after the startling news, startling to her, that uh, that Elaine knew him from childhood. He was the court bard at Camlin and had been Morgase's lover. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, I love how scandalized Nynaeve was
Yeah.
about that fact. Wait, Morgase, your mother's lover? Because that's just not the kind of thing. You didn't have a lover in the Two Rivers.
Right.
You married someone, or you were sometimes even forced to marry someone. The society there was pretty close knit, and I assumed would shun people who didn't fall in line with
Right.
the proprieties of the community. So she was still just terribly shocked by this,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that so interesting, and I guess I don't know. It gives me a glimpse of a little bit of naivete in certain parts of her life, where
Mm-hmm.
other parts, she's become a rather worldly person. She's
Yes.
becoming well traveled. She does adapt quickly to the dresses and things that
Mm-hmm.
women wear in other countries, which are scandalous, back in her hometown
Yeah.
or were up until a point in time here. But she still, so she very quickly adapts to some things, but others she holds on to these old values, and I like that. It makes her character richer to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, enough gushing over Nynaeve, I suppose. Um, but yeah, how she, she's studying him critically in his physical attributes, but that gives her a moment to stop and think about the other things that he does and how he's always picking up gossip, and he'll take these little clues from here and little clues from there, and it doesn't just see what's going on in that town or in that region, but he puts it together on a national scale, and sometimes to their limited understanding, a global scale. What will this mean to the leaders in this country or that country? And so she's actually kind of impressed by his knowledge and how he puts that together. He's been doing it the entire time,
Yeah.
but she just had her eyes opened to the fact that he's more than just a simple gleeman. So we see that up until now, she's been judging him not just by what he does and the information that he gathers and how helpful he is, but she's been judging him a lot by his looks and appearances, not just the physical appearances, but the way he dresses and the person he pretends to be. And Tom has been doing a lot of pretending to being a simple gleeman who could not hurt anyone. And in truth, he can be a very dangerous man, but because I guess you say his limits are very far out there. He stays away from them most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when he pushes himself to the limits, he changes um, leadership in countries. He's done it twice now up to
Yeah.
this point in the story. And she's totally oblivious to it because it's not the kind of thing he goes around and talks about. He doesn't need to. He's very self confident in who he is. But he doesn't have to come out and brag about these things or portray himself in this way, try to make himself out to be something more. In fact, he's almost like a spy. He is continually making himself seem less than he really is,
Mm-hmm.
not just in the service of one country, but right now, really in the service of this group of people that he seems to have adopted as family.
Yeah, he's kind of a
And
free agent spy.
yes, yes, yes. And ultimately, I think his goal, began to protect these boys from Warren, but it grew into protecting this group of people that I like, and just we're gonna work toward winning at Tarmangaiden, and seeing the light victorious. But he plays such a huge role, and here we see Nynaeve just opening the doors of her mind to see this, to put together the things she's seen from him, and she doesn't see the entire picture of Tom, but she sees a little more of it than she did before, and I like to see that dawning, that uh, I don't know, realization come upon her that he's a little more than she thought.
Yeah, and it's interesting how quickly Nynaeve can think on her feet like that and really put some things together, but it's only in certain situations, right? It's not just
Yes,
that she's kind
yes,
of overpowered intellectually in the story. I think it makes it a little more believable that um, she is sharp about it sometimes, and then there are other things she doesn't really catch on to or doesn't catch up with when somebody else is kind of driving a situation. So one of them
right.
I noticed is when they're talking with Sarandon. And something else to point out about this, I think, is that she still hasn't changed her stereotype of Shanshan people. So she did change her attitude towards Egyanan. She met one that she trusts, but Egyanan is still the exception in her mind. So
Right.
when she's approaching Sarandon, she thinks of it as a matter of safety to be on guard when she hears Shanshan accents. And of course, we want her to learn to treat people on a more case by case basis. It was a start when she
Right.
learned to take Egyanan for who she is instead of where she comes from. Um, and one of the ways that I think she could do that here is recognize. Here's where I think Elaine was smart about the situation, perhaps because of a political background. Elaine noticed that Sarandon doesn't have any power in her current situation. So they don't really have to worry about her hurting them because she's not in a position to do that. Elaine offered protection rather than threats, and that's something that she could use to get information out of this woman if they wanted that. If they did want something from her, or they did even want to kind of keep tabs on her, keep an eye on her or something, Elaine's offer of protection, which might have just looked like just plain kindness on the surface, would actually be more useful. So even if Nynaeve still wanted to be cautious, Elaine's strategy was probably a more effective way to do that. And Nynaeve kind of admitted to herself that that's not something she ever would have thought of, and I think that's still because of her prejudice. Whereas Elaine was approaching this as some kind of fresh political negotiation type of situation almost, without thinking of the person as Shanshan. And that I imagine that has something to do with her political education because she probably has all this etiquette training in diplomacy and she needs to learn how not to think of people, stereotypically as representatives of their nation or something. I'm just guessing. I don't really know how Morgase
Yeah.
trained her in that, but I'm trying to figure out why, even though she's younger and sheltered in a lot of ways, she's better able to handle these types of situations. And I can't really
I
blame
agree.
Nynaeve still for being so scared of Shanshan since she's so protective of her people with the way that she saw
Right.
Egwene treated.
Right. And I agree with what you're saying about Elaine's teaching or education, and being able to work with people, but also negotiating skills.
Yes.
You walk
Yeah,
into a
that's what I was trying to
negotiation,
get
you
at
try
too.
to
That's a good point.
oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you try to ascertain that person's weak point, and
Right.
she instantly caught on to the fact this woman is alone here. She's been abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when they were talking with her, of course, the woman tries to claim she's not heard of Xian Chan. She's obviously not good at this because she wasn't trained as a spy. If
Yeah.
you're dealing with elephants, you're not subtle. That's not your gift. You're not a subtle agent. But yeah, Elaine, quickly picked up on that and even began saying, "I bet you were there at Toman Head. He got left behind when at the disaster at Falma." And the fact that they knew about this information, they even brought up Damane and Suldam, and they knew some of these words, knew some of these terms. They were familiar somewhat with Xianqian. And this is the first time that Sarandon has interacted with anyone since the disaster at Falma who understood the Xianqian, who had even
Yeah.
heard of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so instantly she finds something familiar in them,
Yeah.
even if she knows that they know enough about her to be considered an enemy. It's still she's desperately grabbing onto the familiar because you have to look at how precarious her situation is.
Yeah.
All it takes is the wrong person recognizing her Xianqian accent,
Mm-hmm.
and she's outed as being the enemy. Plus, the boar horses had just gone wild, or
Yeah.
shredded the elephants had just gone wild in the town just before that, and she had to worry about, will I be kicked out of the show?
Right.
Is this the last straw? Is this too much for them to keep me on and be a part of the show? So she's in a position that could get a lot worse at any moment. And so there's so many things working against her here that she grasped on to the first bit of familiarity that she had.
Mm.
And again, Nynaeve, as you said, was completely oblivious to most of this. I think she wanted to approach Sarandon more as, what in the heck are you doing here?
Yeah.
And don't you
Yeah.
mess with me and my people. And
Mm-hmm.
and thankfully, Elaine took the lead on their discussion here
Yeah.
and most of the interaction with her. And then you see that interesting turn where Sarandon recognizes that Elaine really is nobility. She is,
Mm-hmm.
in Sarandon's mind, of the blood, and which, to a degree, she actually is.
Yeah.
Somewhat descended from Arthur Hawkwing. And Elaine didn't say that, and Nynaeve didn't. I don't remember her saying anything about you being the daughter heir of Andor. But Sarandon saw this and it recognized her, and for her lineage to some degree, and falls down on her knees. I'll swear, to be your servant, High Lady. Yes, that didn't draw any attention from anybody. That's normal, commonplace ways of acting. But one of the great things, bringing up Elaine's political acumen here, again, she says, well, here, in exchange for information, we'll teach you how to act. We don't do that over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll teach you how to act and blend in better. So she's offering protection, with her words, but then starts to give her a course. Here's some of the ways we'll begin protecting. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to help you blend in a little better, and and it worked, and they became friends. What you said earlier too about um, Nynaeve seeing Sarandon for her nationality first. Um, you know, to a degree, we all do that when we first meet someone,
Mm-hmm.
because when you meet someone, you begin mentally cataloging bits of information about them. If their name is given to me, that's one bit of information I take and catalog away someplace temporary because I always lose names. I have a very difficult time remembering anyone's name. But you whether you're aware of it or not, you do look at the way a person is dressed, at the way they carry themselves physically. Do they walk with their head high with good posture with confidence? Are they slouching and look like they're trying to hide behind themselves, or any other of 100 different things? Also, the way a person speaks.
Mm-hmm.
If they speak with an accent of a different nation or accent of a different part of the country, we instantly begin cataloging these bits of information. And at first, that's really all we have to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing that Nynaeve hasn't learned yet is she hasn't learned you start there, but you don't make assumptions. You don't group them in and say, well, all people of Xianqian nationality are like this. They're
Yeah.
all bad. They're all evil. They're all warriors. They all want to collar women. They all want to make slaves of everybody. Those things are true of Xianqian society and the way it operates, the
Mm-hmm.
way it moves forward. But that's not true of every Xianqian individual. Everyone loves it when you say, "Oh yes, I know another Seanchan person. Have you ever met them? And it's like, well, there's millions of Seanchan people.
Yeah.
Don't automatically assume they know each other
Yeah.
just because they're both from that same country.
And we have to think about the fact that our Two Rivers characters especially have they've had no social education in those principles that you're talking about right now, like against
Right.
stereotypes. You have all the leaders of their village talking, and well, their village is talking about how Terran Fairy people are sneaky and
Yeah, they're
devious and
all
those types of
thieves.
things, right?
That's
Yeah, exactly. So they've had no formal education, any of them anyway, which does tend to change the way that you think in a pretty permanent
exactly.
way. If you've had even more than about 2 years of formal education, you're exposed to so many other people's perspectives that it really kind of changes the way your brain is wired, I think. And at least I'm thinking of my K through 12. I'm thinking of my, like, grade school education, and I had we would have teachers and counselors and stuff saying things like, "Oh, if everybody was the same, the world would be really boring." And I had that education at home and in religious contexts too, and those types of, we at least in many structures that I was involved in growing up, that I was educated through, there was at least lip service paid to not judging people based on their group membership. I don't know that it
Right.
always works that way in practice, right? But
Right.
there was at least that idea. Nynaeve, I don't think has ever
Starting point.
even been exposed to such a principle. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Well, the Two Rivers is so insulated
Mm-hmm.
from the rest of society. The only outsiders who really ever come there are the merchants. And I think
Yeah.
the merchants are used to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like they would talk about the merchants' guards. Every now and then one of them would come in and he would start telling stories of some false dragon out somewhere. Well, he wasn't allowed back next time.
Yeah.
The merchants knew, yeah, I can't bring this guy into the Two Rivers. I could take him as a guard anywhere else, but not into the Two Rivers because those people are rather closed minded. And that's the way it began because they had no real contact with the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
All they knew about the rest of the world is that it was big, it was scary. There were Aes Sedai out there doing all these crazy plots and plans, and all these stories that had grown up about the things that were going on in the rest of the world. But they were insulated away from that, so that's really their only exposure was the stories and things that were brought in through the merchants who were coming to buy wool and tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, they really didn't have a chance to learn how to get to know someone of a different culture and do it
Yeah.
tactfully,
Right.
and how to treat people as individuals instead of a society first. Because, like you said, they they not only were insulated from the rest of the world, but they were encouraged to treat people as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the Two Rivers was our folk. Now you had the Coplans and Congers over here that were a little questionable at times.
Yeah.
You had the Terran Fairy people that were all cheats and scoundrels, and then these merchants guards that you could talk to occasionally, but you couldn't really trust them because they were outsiders. And so they were really encouraged. Even the women are encouraged not to really trust men, and
Mm.
men encouraged not to really trust women by the way they talk to one another. And as
Yeah.
I said, some of that is just talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of their way almost of expressing affection for one another. But Nynaeve did say something about she believed the Creator only made men to make trouble for women.
Yeah.
It's not a direct quote. I can
Right.
find it here in a
These gender dynamics you're talking about also remind me of one more thing that really surprised me in this chapter. I mean, it's interesting that it surprised me on a reread because I've reread this stuff enough that it really shouldn't, but I just saw this from a little bit of a different light when I was trying to pick through the way that both of these women rejected Vale and Luca because he flirted with both of them. He said,
Yes.
he wants Elaine to oh, just pose as my girlfriend, and that'll pay your way. You share the
Yeah,
wagon
you
with me.
stay. Yes, yes, stay in my wagon and pretend to
Mm-hmm.
be my girlfriend. And the way he grinned, they knew he was thinking of more. If we start out pretending,
Yeah,
maybe it
exactly.
become real. Right.
And at first she said no, thank you. Elaine did, and then there was another offer, and she slapped him. And Nynaeve sarcastically suggested that she herself would do that, but they're both being really fearlessly assertive with him at times, which I think is interesting. Luca seems to take Nynaeve's sarcastic suggestion seriously, at least if we take his advances towards her later as any indication. He's not really deterred by the way she's handling the situation. But I think what's interesting about both of them, even though they handle this differently, Elaine and Nynaeve, neither of them seem to be afraid of rejecting him, even though it seems like he would have a lot of power in this situation. They seem to not be worried about that at all. And I don't know if it's just because of being Aes Sedai. I mean, they should feel vulnerable here because they're still in Amador. Or
Right.
Amadisia. What? Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. I'm a DC.
Yeah.
I was agreeing with you like I had sense. Yeah,
What
you're
is
right.
Amador? What? Never mind. I'll handle that later. Is it like one of
Yeah.
those things where one's like the city and the other one's the country? I always get some of those mixed up. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So there's, even though they're still in Amadisia, you'd think they'd be afraid of channeling, right? But I think they still feel that ability gives them a little bit of, a little bit of power, or rights some kind of a power imbalance in many situations. We saw how they thought that with the Rhonda Macura situation erroneously. They should have been more cautious. But I just think the fact that they don't have any fear of rejecting a man, it kind of speaks to the fact that, like Robert Jordan said, he tried to write gender roles relatively equal instead of being a patriarchy or a matriarchy. And there's a variety of ways that gender is kind of negotiated, I think, in all the different societies. But in general, this is where I see that, because in our age and anywhere that I've ever lived, I and most women I've ever met would probably be afraid of rejecting somebody like Luca in that situation. If somebody drives up to you and invites you into their car, you're not going to get into it, right? But you want to reject them with a smile, because if you don't, what are they going to do about it? They might suddenly take that as a challenge.
Right.
And so you don't ever want to rock the boat too if it's somebody you have to be around consistently. If it's a little different when it's a rando on the street. Sometimes you may feel like you could get away from that interaction and probably never see them again. So if you said something mean, and if you escape at that one time, you might be okay. But if it's somebody like your boss at work or something, which is kind of the position Luca would be in for them here, it's scary. Like, you want to keep your job, but you also don't want what he's offering. So you might want to just reject with a smile and have an excuse, not just a no, because they will kind of press at that no. Maybe having some kind of an alibi type thing, or, oh, I have a boyfriend, something that where they feel like your no could be backed up by something.
Right.
We have to have all these strategies for rejecting men. I guess my point is Elaine and Nynaeve don't really seem to think about any of that. And part of it could just be that maybe Robert Jordan didn't fully appreciate the lived experiences that women do that, or maybe he was intentionally writing it so that these women are a little more fearless because gender's different in this world, plus they're Aes Sedai and they have this channeling ability. They don't feel as powerless. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting, because I don't think I would have taken either of their approaches. Like, never would have slapped somebody in the face or anything else. And I don't know.
And I think a lot of this could be because it was written from, by a male author, because I never would have thought of that, of what you said, of how a woman oftentimes feels like she needs an excuse or something to back that up, any sort of rejection. It can't just be a no. There has to be something else there. And it really got me to thinking, trying to put myself in those shoes, because I think most of us men don't understand that. When you're young and you're first starting to explore those differences in the gender roles, as a young boy, there were so many girls I went to school with who were so beautiful and so cute, and you find yourself just looking at them. It's just, not even thinking dirty thoughts. They're just pretty. You just want to look at something pretty and someone pretty, and you want that someone to be your girlfriend, but you can never talk to them because if they're walking down the hall, they always travel in packs.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's the most frustrating thing to a boy is like you want to talk to this girl,
Uh-huh.
but you can't get her with just one on one where you can talk to her. You've always got an audience because they always travel in packs, and it was so frustrating. And it wasn't until I'd been an adult for many years that I understood why girls travel in
Yeah.
packs. Because even if the boys are just looking at them innocently, wanting to look at someone beautiful, if someone's staring at you like that, you start to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, we
You
don't know
start
the
to feel
difference.
powerless.
We don't know which of you is
Right.
innocent or not. We don't have that information. So we
Exactly.
got to kind of be on guard. It's sort of basically all the stuff, your generation taught us millennials about stranger danger when we were kids still applies to women as when we're adults. We still think about all those same things, like how to gouge somebody's eyes out if they're attacking
Right.
you, and
Right.
and how to hold your keys between your fingers to use them as a weapon, and those types of things are just kind of always there. Whereas I feel like maybe boys at some point grow out of always thinking about those things. I don't know, but you can
Right.
imagine all the
Right.
types of things you have told kids and seen kids told on TV shows and everything about how to respond if an adult asks them to do something sketchy. I mean, that's kind of still how I think if strange men are talking to me.
And at work, when I'm around customers and I can be in a situation where I'm relatively one on one with women and talk to them, and there doesn't seem to be that discomfort
Hmm.
because we're both, we have professional jobs and we're interacting professionally. And
Yeah.
if you ever get on, personal territory and discussion, then you see everyone's demeanor change. So you
Yeah.
learn to avoid those things
Hmm.
because I don't want to make people uncomfortable. I'm just
Yeah.
having a discussion. We're talking about children or family or the job, the work, whatever. And as long as you stay on the safe topics, it is safe. And everyone feels comfortable, and you can enjoy your job. Uh, and some people, I guess, don't understand that.
Hmm.
They begin talking about things that are too personal, and I guess that's one of the things. I guess us guys, it would behoove us to learn is how to talk to women, in a way that doesn't make them uncomfortable, and how to be around them. And I don't know that we can ever fully achieve that,
Hmm.
but if you're a good guy and you have no ill intentions and nothing, how do you convey that?
Right.
Sometimes I guess we can't because of other
Hmm.
people's experiences and what they've gone through. But I think I would like to think of myself as the typical Southern gentleman who will
Yeah.
open a door for a woman, who will be nice, will be courteous, will engage in conversation, and have no designs beyond that. But you can't just wear a sign saying I'm one of the safe ones.
Right, right, exactly. That's a great point. I guess, yeah,
Right.
that's probably what many men may not realize is just that for many women, just where our baseline, our default is at, is going to be a little more wary, whereas men
Right.
aren't necessarily thinking about that because their primary threats from women are different. I'm not saying that women don't hurt men and that men don't face any threats
Oh,
from women, but they're
absolutely.
different. It's not likely that you're going to be attacked physically by a woman you don't know or something like that, right? And it's
Right.
not
Right.
incredibly hugely likely that women are attacked by
Right.
stranger
It
men
it
either.
has and yeah, it has happened, it can happen,
Right.
but it's not as likely, so we don't go around thinking of that. Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it not only is just it's not only that it happens a lot, but it's also just sort of how we're trained to think. Like I said, I think girls get a lot more of that stranger danger type training, even
Right.
as we're getting a little older in our adolescence. Whereas boys probably don't get quite as much of that. They get probably more of the lectures on like I don't even know. I'm just guessing on like how to drive safely and stuff. Because I'm trying to think about what are the major threats for teenage boys, and it's like they get into car crashes or get arrested for doing dumb stuff while drunk or something like that.
Right. Right.
So they
Exactly.
probably get more
Drinking
of
and
those
driving.
types of talks. Yeah,
Yeah. Even if it's not mixed together, those 2 things, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I agree. That was where my mind went as well. Um, yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know if this was written this way because, as you said, Jordan wanted to show a world where you could be that free, or
Hmm.
just thought of from a man's perspective, that's
Right.
how you would expect a woman to act and how
Hmm.
you'd want her to act. and not knowing that she would be afraid to respond in that way, because until you've walked in those shoes, you just don't know. And it's really made me stop and think of you know how men are perceived by women, because
Mm.
I guarantee it's not the way that I perceive myself.
Yeah.
Because again, well, as I've heard it said years ago, men and women can never be equal until a woman can walk down the street with a bald head, a beer gut, and still think she's gorgeous. Because
Yeah.
that's the way we men view ourselves. It doesn't really matter how we look. We still think we're awesome and handsome. Um, and and just so all of you listeners will know, Lajara has had to put up with jokes like that her entire life. I
Now the
forget
rest of you
sometimes. Not
finally get a taste of it. Yeah.
yes, the rest of the world doesn't really know what you've had to endure. Oh my! But yeah, I guess I can only stay on a serious topic for so long.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, uh, we I would rather live in a world where women could react that way safely,
Mhm.
as one where they feel like they have to be afraid.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think we have to change men and women so much as we just need to learn, how to act that way around each other. Where men can be respectful, can be a borderlander who would give his
Mm.
life for a woman and think that's a small thing just to keep her safe. Where we can be like Rand, who, you know, was scandalized to think of kissing a girl that he wasn't married to. Just and not that we have to be too prudish, but
Right.
to not even think of taking advantage of someone
Mm, right.
in
I
a
see
weak
your
moment.
point.
Right. So yeah, I would rather live in that kind of world. I just don't know how to make it that safe, but I can do one thing. I can make it that safe for the women around me in the way I treat them,
Yeah.
and I can do it while still being a tough guy and a macho nerd, if there is such a thing, but still making others safe. And I don't know. I hope everybody can learn a little something from this one, because we definitely got off topic, but
Yeah, that's true. But
that's just the things we see within our characters. And again,
yeah, and I guess to put a little more of a Wheel of Time bow on that thought, that would be kind of a solution or a possible solution. It's not going to change it for every single person or make all men everywhere, safe for, as women perceive them. But
right,
let's think about like when Alana forcibly bonds Rand and how other Aes Sedai react. I think something that could prevent warder bonds from being used in abusive ways is if other Aes Sedai hold each other accountable, which nobody really
yeah,
does with Alana. And so it's not that like, okay, you as a nice guy, you control what all other men do. It's more like if you know anybody who are your friends and you hear them talk about women or to women in ways that you now know are sketchy,
right,
then don't just let that slide. Call them out on it and say, "Hey, we don't do that here," or something like that. I think
right, right,
that's one of the simple things that we could do. Or if you find out something a lot worse about a man that you're friends with, that he has treated women poorly, may take cutting ties with that person instead of just being like, oh, he's always been nice to me, so he must be fine. So yeah, that's one of the
oh,
possible solutions. Like we've seen where people have thought about, oh, Alana, that's totally illegal. This shouldn't have happened. She should be in big trouble for this. But they kind of just think of what she did as, well, it worked out anyway, and they don't do anything to her about it. So yeah, she probably should have gotten some kind of consequences other than
yeah,
just it's miserable to be bonded to Rand, which like she actually did experience some natural consequences, but like I said, I should have like said or done something about it.
right. Somehow made her give up that bond or something,
Yeah, right, because it is
and
possible
take
to
some other
release it, which
punishment for
Rand
it.
didn't even know.
Yeah,
But yeah, somebody could
right.
have like made her do that. That's a good point.
I hope that our podcast just shed some light on some great things like this. I also hope that all of you will join us next time as we get into season 3, episode 10, where we'll cover the fires of heaven, chapters 33 and 34.
Wheel of Mind is written by Lajara and Giskel and produced by me, Lajara. Our original theme music was composed by Wendigo. You can find his new Lairs EP on SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube, and those links will be in the description. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Mind, but this is an ending. To catch a beginning next time an episode drops, subscribe to Wheel of Mind on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, or Spotify. You can also find our episodes on YouTube under the channel name Lajara Dane. That's Lajara-Dayne. To leave feedback, rate and review on whichever platform you use to listen to us, or contact us at lajaradane@gmail.com or at mind_wheel on Twitter. To support the show, subscribe to us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/wheelofmind.